The first day I did the long drive from Texas to New Mexico. I found a nice spot at Aguirre Springs campground for the night, but a sandstorm rolled in. Luckily, the mountains protected me from most of it, and I woke up to a nice crisp morning. That day, I hiked White Sands National Park, rode some dunes on an old skateboard, ate some lunch, got out of there, and drove to an Airbnb in Tucson, Arizona. Next morning, I woke up super early to beat the heat and hiked Saguaro National Park, hung with some cacti. On the way out of there, I passed an awesome air museum I just had to check out. It had multiple hangars and airfields of pretty much every plane you can imagine. It was pretty sweet. Next, I checked out a cave dwelling called Montezuma's Castle and camped for the night near Sedona, Arizona. The next day, I fought the crowds of Sedona, Arizona, did a hike to the Devil's Bridge, and got recharged from the healing energy at the Vortex. After that, I did a nice drive north to Flagstaff, Arizona, where I stayed for the night. In the morning, I got to Petrified Forest National Park nice and early, and had all these insane hikes all to myself. It was really a special experience. After that, I went to Meteor Crater National Landmark. It was pretty awesome, but also a little scary to think about if something like that was to happen again. The next morning, I went to the Grand Canyon, waited in a long line to get into the park, but it is the Grand Canyon. That night, I camped on the banks of Lake Powell, avoided the sand, watched a nice sunset and sunrise, then went to Vermilion Cliffs National Monument. After saying if it rains I'm gonna die for 4 miles, decided to get out of there and drive to Bryce Canyon National Park. The next morning I got to the park nice and early, beat the crowds, and had some of the most popular hikes all to myself. Just in a few hours, these places were packed with people. I did the same thing the next morning at Capitol Reef National Park, but the weather kept most of the people away in the morning. In the afternoon it cleared up and I did a really cool hike to Cassidy Arch. After the arch, I just drove through the park, checked out some petroglyph cave drawings, and head towards Salt Lake City. The next day I drove my car out to the Bonneville Salt Flats and had way more fun than I ever expected. 0 rules, 0 speed limits, just miles of flat open ground, and I definitely had way more fun than I should have. That night I camped in the mountains right next to Salt Lake City and woke up with 5 inches of snow on the ground. I decided to use that to my advantage, hiking up the local closed ski resort and getting some powder turns in. That night, last minute, I got a ticket to the Jazz and Grizzlies NBA playoff game, which really was the cherry on top to an awesome trip.